Welcome to the Orthodontic Pearls Podcast, where we share tips and tricks to better your clinic, business, and life. Today, we have our honored guests, the braces guy, Dr. Grant Collins, and Dr. Jacob Koch, as we explore some of the biggest challenges we face as orthodontists. And now your hosts of the podcast, Drs. Chris Teeters, Brian Anderson, and Andy Sarpotdar.
All right. Well, welcome to our first Orthodontic Pearls podcast. Today we have with us the braces guy, Dr. Grant Collins himself.
Hey.
Welcome to the podcast, Grant. And then we also have Dr. Jacob Koch here.
Hi.
Welcome to the podcast, Jacob.
Thank you.
So this is a podcast where we will seek to do some conversations with our Orthodontic Pearls community. I myself, Andy Sarpotdar, will be facilitating along with my co-host, Chris Teeters and Brian Anderson. Say hi, guys.
Hey, Andy.
What's up? Good to be here.
How you doing?
Good to be here. All right, guys. And of course, we're at the Annual Mother of Pearls Conference here in Scottsdale, Arizona at the Talking Stick Resort. How's that been going so far for us, Chris?
It's been great. It's been our biggest year ever with 500 attendees, an amazing house party last night. Really excited about next year too, as we'll be going to Cape Canaveral in Florida, October 9th through 11th. So we'd love to see you there.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that one. I'm going to bring the whole family for that, get some Disneyland going.
Perfect.
It's going to be kind of like space camp too, honestly.
Space camp.
I mean, all of us probably, at least at one point, loved looking at books of,
That movie.
outer space.
That movie, Space Camp.
Yeah, no, I think so it kind of appeals to that part of us. I'm sure all of us orthodontists are kind of nerds. Let's just be honest.
Speak for yourself there. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, I think that's going to be awesome. I'm really looking forward to that. Great venue. Anyone been to Cape Canaveral Kennedy Space Center? That's where we're having it.
Yeah. Been there.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah, they have one of the space shuttles there. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Really cool. All right, looking forward to that. Brian, I'd love to check in with our Orthodontic Pearls community here. And one of the things we want to do on the podcast is highlight some of the discussions. Obviously, we don't have time to go into everything, but what are the hot topics on the Orthodontic Pearls Facebook group?
Yeah, so one that I thought was really interesting this last week that got quite a bit of engagement was from Dr. Grant Coleman. He said that it's his 21st year of practice. Did you guys see this one?
That's
Close.
so close to me.
Close, Collins.
I thought it was me. I was getting excited for like 1 second. I'm like, wow, what a nice guy. But really, not at all.
No, I'm
It's
sorry.
just a tease.
I'm sorry. I'm total tease.
Okay.
But Grant Coleman said it's his 21st year of practice, and it seems to me that, quote, you need premolars extracted conversations are a lot longer and received with a lot more skepticism than they were when I first started practice. The looks on patients' and parents' faces when I propose extractions are frequently shocked. Anyone else experiencing increased resistance to what used to be commonplace, I'd love to hear your thoughts. There's a lot of engagement. I thought it's interesting because obviously we're shifting away from extractions, or at least in the last 20, 30 years, but now I think it's actually going back toward extraction. I know in my own practice, I feel like I'm doing more extractions now than I was because I drank the Kool-Aid and I think I was too much non-extraction, although I still tend to do non-extraction for the vast majority of things. But just the discussion there was really interesting. That dentists, of course, now are being educated that extractions are unnecessary, that they're bad, that they affect airway. And so then the dentists are passing this on. And some of the comments, orthodontists had mentioned that they referred for extractions, and several of their general dentists refused to extract the teeth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and even like there's like a blocked out upper right 5 or something on one of the comments, and one of our colleagues had said that the upper right 4 was touching the upper right 6, and so we referred to have the 5 extracted, and the dentist said, "I won't do it."
So I just send to oral surgeons,
right? And there was that. So yeah, I thought that was interesting, and of course, it's one of these potentially divisive topics because there's a spectrum of thought on or how necessary extractions and what are some of the side effects from extractions, or what are some of the negative things that go along with extractions versus what are the benefits of extractions? How does it actually lead to better outcomes? So it's a little bit polarized, I'd say, but it was interesting.
Sure.
What do you guys think? Did you guys see that?
I mean, this is, of course, no new topic. I mean, this has been in orthodontics. This debate has been going on forever. And I think there's some within our profession would consider it resolved, but resolved on which side? There's some very dogmatic opinions there. Jacob, what do you think about this? What's your philosophy in general?
I didn't read the thread, but I mean, I feel like there's part of that. The dentist educating people about airway stuff like that. But I feel like that seems like that's a small part of it. Part of it's just like cultural. People are just like, I don't want to take out teeth on my child. And some people will say, whatever you say, doc. It just depends. I feel like it's like cultural and social. Some people do whatever we tell them to do.
Like Grant was saying, there's a sales technique to selling someone on extractions, especially as it does become a bigger discussion in the dental community in general. Yeah, I agree with you there. Grant, what about you? In your practice, do you do mostly extraction, non-extraction? Do you have like strong opinions one way or another?
I'd say we're pretty in the middle because
Good diplomatic answer.
Shocker, right? Yeah, we are not even being politically correct, but truthfully, I think how I view it is taking a step back and being like, okay, how can we understand even the dentists out there? Like, what are their goals from this? They've kind of treated like the treatment modality. It's like, all extractions are bad. But really what they're telling us is we care about the airway, we care about tongue space, we care about things. So what if we could still have that discussion and make sure those are getting addressed in the treatment, even in the event extractions are needed? Because we know as orthodontists, there's going to be times where the crowding is so severe and the proclination is so bad that we're really not going to collapse the airway at all. But that's what their goal is. So what if we learned how to communicate that in a way that has energy flowing together with the dentist? I think that conversation's hard though, because again, until you get that position of against energy out off the table, that's going to be hard to have the conversation. So I think that really keeping it there, keeping it truthful, keeping it open, and every case is different, and we know that. So you treat it that way.
Yeah, I've been lucky because I haven't really had any dentist pushback or questioning. It's not, I don't extract a lot, but I'd say after practicing a lot, you've seen enough. I've tried non-extraction on enough variation of people. Now I'm like, okay, I've seen this story, but I've seen this movie before. I know this is going to look like when we're done. Really need to extract. So definitely more extractions as I go on, because I see where it's going to play out.
I've heard that saying that the longer you go on in practice, the more you tend to extract, and I would agree with that in general.
That's true. Absolutely. Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, Neil Kratis had a post on that in Pearls recently about how he started being very non-extraction, moved toward more and more extractions, noticing that cases were finishing faster, more periodontally stable. I think it got demonized through those publications or thoughts of airway and dentists and pleasing them and whatnot, or the idea of having a broad smile or faces first, or think about the face and not the teeth and the arch. But, I remember hearing a lecture in ortho residency where they said, always beware the extractionist orthodontist and the non-extractionist orthodontist. Because if you're too dogmatic on one approach or the other, you're not actually looking at each case as its individual.
There it is.
And you really just have to look at each case as its own puzzle, its own unique set. And there's no always do this or that.
I want to chime in on that too. And this touches on what Chris just said and something Grant had said earlier. I think ultimately it boils down to an us versus them mentality. That anytime you're engaging in an us versus them mentality, it's not good. So if you're picking a side, I'm a non-extractionist, you're therefore defining your quote unquote opposition, right? And I think that's problematic. And so what Chris described was more considering every case individually. So at that point, you don't have a fixed position. You don't view yourself as belonging to one side or the other. You view yourself as trying to make the right decision. Right. And you might have preferences, but you don't belong to a side. So there's less tribalistic thinking there. And to what Grant said, I thought it was really interesting, Grant, how it sounds to me like you're describing you don't want to have oppositional energy with a dentist who has these legitimate concerns, right? Or at least they're legitimately concerned about this for the patient, right? And so I think even just acknowledging those things, like, yeah, totally. There's at least it makes sense, and so, we want to keep things broad. We want to make sure that we're not, encroaching on anything. Because the reality is, and Andy, you mentioned that the debate settled.
Some people see it as settled, but which side of that do they fall on? Like this is with your extractions versus non-extractions. Like maybe that's the wrong mindset to have, as I fall into one of those two camps. Maybe I'm just an orthodontist who actually does a diagnosis, but then you get into all the nitty gritty of, well, what constitutes an extraction case? Is it just for crowding? I mean, that's the crux of the issue as I see it. Is there's some who will extract. You see crowding, that's extraction automatically. And there's some who, no matter what is going on, they could have teeth flaring out of their face. And it's like, we don't take out teeth here either. So I think it comes down to, what are you diagnosing? What are you looking for to determine which of these directions to go in? I think periodontal stability personally is a big one. We look at periodontal biotype. So just because someone has, say, a completely blocked out incisor, mandibular incisor, doesn't mean that there's not enough space to align that. You have to look at, well, how much labial bone does this person have? If they're a thick biotype there, you can do a lot with that. How dumped in are the molars? Because you don't want to have a really deep curve of Wilson at the end of this. So how much room do you have to upright? My personal philosophy is that the mandible is the limiting factor when it comes to extractions. We have great technology when it comes to maxillary expansion at this point, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. You're not making any compromises if you're going to expand the maxilla, assuming that the mandible has room to upright as well. So I don't do a ton of extraction in my office. I definitely do it when I think that it's warranted. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the conversations with our dentists tend to sometimes degrade, is that there are schools out there that say any extraction is going to affect the airway, is going to affect the tongue position. That's frankly just not true. I mean, I think we can all agree with that. But you do have to be very conscientious in your diagnosis and be a doctor at the end of the day.
A big thing for me is lip position. I think that we know our nose and chin keep growing the rest of our lives, but our lips do not. Yeah. So we know that if we're extracting in a case that doesn't have at least a certain amount of crowding, that the lip position will move back, and then that will flatten the face. You'll look older, younger. And I think that even approaching a dentist, talking about, I'm trying to do non-extraction on the cases to preserve the face, where it's periodontally stable, where it's, so you got to look at, 4 or 5 different things, not just crowding, but face, periodontal stability, the overall aesthetics of the smile, although teeth dumped in. And I think by assessing all of those factors, and it might tip you one way or the other, you know?
Right.
And then sometimes it comes down to, okay, well, here are the pros and cons of both options, and Mom, you can choose. I'm comfortable going either way here. Yeah. And there's other times you say, well, we could go on extraction, but you're going to extend your treatment time for a year, and we'll talk about this again in a year, so I wouldn't do it. Right.
Well, I think one thing that's important too is some of the stuff we don't have great answers on. Some of the research we don't. I mean, we have some research answers, sure, but some of these questions are hard to study. So, like concerning airway, for example, and to go back to Grant's point, I think you can still validate the patient's concern. You can still validate the dentist's concern. Again, you don't want to turn it into an us versus them. Well, no, they're wrong. It doesn't affect blah, blah, blah. Because in reality, we don't really know, I don't think.
Right.
No.
I would be not surprised at all if there is some effect, if there is some link.
Yeah.
I think to be absolute and say there's no effect, well, I don't know that that's true. But it's probably not nearly as much as, some people would like to believe it is, right? Yeah. So I think the middle ground often is where the truth is found, and that's, of course, sometimes less interesting. But as you were describing, Andy, you have to think. Like you said, diagnose each case, look at each case. You have to think. That's hard, but ultimately I think that's what we're called to do, is to think, to constantly think.
Especially for some of us, yeah. I'm just kidding. Not looking at anyone. Not looking at anybody. No, in particular. I'm totally that guy. But I totally agree with that. Like, there's also leaving some space to say there can be that middle ground, that gray area that says, hey, none of us are really the gatekeeper of what's right and wrong in these situations. There's going to be some ability to say, I might have a difference of opinion in this moment, and being okay with that. And then owning yours, but also making sure when the conversation does happen, you're not switch tracking where you're arguing for the sake of argument over different things, making sure that the same items are on the table that we're talking about.
Arguing for the sake of arguing.
Yeah. Well, then it's a defensiveness because you're protecting ego, you're protecting your ability to be right. Yeah. Versus let's make sure we're talking about the same things, and then at the end of the day,
us versus them,
that's the say, hey, look, like if you oppose my viewpoint, it's not my right to prove your viewpoint wrong or right. This is just how I'm going to treat the case, or how I would treat this case, and be okay with it.
I think that's how you can still have your position, but you don't become an us, and they're not a them. Yep. Exactly. I'm just me, you're you.
Yes.
It's not a sides thing.
100%.
That's where it's critical.
If you're an orthodontist that wants to connect with over 500 colleagues, hear over 30 of the best speakers in orthodontics, including the braces guy, Dr. Grant Collins, who you've heard on this podcast, and see 50 of the most cutting-edge exhibits, have a chance to win some of over $70,000 worth of prizes, including a trip to Kauai, and enjoy the absolute best parties in orthodontics, you won't want to miss the 7th Annual MOPC, the Mother of Pearls Conference, coming this October 9th through 11th. We're going big for our 7th year by renting out the Astronaut Memorial Foundation at the Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida. This is the hub for NASA, where they train more astronauts than anywhere else in the world, and SpaceX launches occur all the time. We toured the campus, and let me tell you, it's like the Disney World of space, with theme park attractions, actual space shuttles, interactive exhibits, and real astronauts. On top of the best speakers, we'll be having our world-famous Friday Night Pearls party under the Saturn Apollo 5 rocket, with dinner, drinks, space-themed activities, and live music from the world's only all-orthodontist band, Relapse. Early bird prices are about to go up for every 100 tickets sold and have already gone up twice. Be sure to register today with your team at orthodonticpearls.org to get the best price for the best conference in orthodontics. Plus, we are the only conference with worry-free registration. If anything comes up and you can't make it for any reason, you can transfer your registration to next year's conference absolutely free. It's a no-brainer. So be sure to lock in your best price by registering you and your team for the best conference in orthodontics, the Mother Pearls Conference, at orthodonticpearls.org today.
Another segment we want to do on this podcast is just an update on the state of the profession. I thought this was very valuable. I'm always wondering, right now I think most of us, our practices are not doing as well as we would like them to be. Maybe some of us are even down.
Dude, mine's crushing it, bro.
Yeah, I bet yours is. Yeah, crushed like your ankle, huh?
Like your ankle.
Just about as bad, yeah.
Just about as bad.
I just broke my leg last Saturday. That's what Andy's referring to.
Yeah.
Had surgery a few days ago, and it was bad. So.
And 2 days later, you get on a plane, you play a 2-hour Relapse concert, and help kick off the Mother Pearls Conference. You
didn't help me with the equipment out of the car, though. I noticed that.
I really shirked that responsibility.
You did.
Didn't I?
Shirked is what I would say. Yes.
I knew you would.
But well, at any rate, so we have some market data from Shannon Patterson from Benson Koppel Patterson and Associates, as well as Jake Schweizer from Gage, and I find this stuff pretty interesting. Hopefully, you guys do too. Let's start off with that interest rate cut. So 50 basis points, I think we all know that happened in September, and we're probably going to get another one coming up by the end of fourth quarter. That's going to affect the economy, at least we would presume so. We're noticing that inflation is still sluggish at around 3%, but really it's not the inflation itself that is hurting consumer sentiment right now, it's the prices, because of course inflation is prices, the rate of increase of prices, but prices are not going down, at least not significantly. So consumers still feel prices are high across the board. And of course, orthodontics is generally a luxury elective procedure. So we can be first on the chopping block for some who are trying to conserve. Now, you look at the Gage numbers, and these actually don't look too bad. Across the country, year to date, production's only down about 1.5%. Starts are down about 2%. So most practices in aggregate are pretty flat. But one thing that's really important to consider is Gage is 900 practices, and these are the type of practices who have the bandwidth, who have the resources to be with Gage in the first place. So again, take these numbers with a grain of salt, but the sky's not necessarily falling. Shannon, however, has been getting some phone calls from people saying they're down as much as 5 to 15%. Some people are saying they're flat or slightly up, so it runs the gambit here. Geography does seem to play a role. I think most of us can appreciate that. So the rural practices, they're not feeling it quite as much as the highly saturated metropolitan areas. Of course, new patient call volume is down, and that's probably correlated with the election coming up. So hopefully the nation's going to breathe a sigh of relief after all of this and start purchasing again. This is interesting. The practices that have the higher percentage of adult patients are the ones who are mostly feeling stagnant or down compared to last year. So the average practice sees maybe 25 to 30% adults. If you happen to be on the higher end of that, then you're probably seeing more of a pullback than someone who's tied to pedo, for example. This, of course, comes back to the fact that adults are going to put their kids first. They'll delay their own treatment, but their kids are always going to be taken care of. So yeah, if you work with a pediatric dentist, good on you. Well, overall, the future still looks good. We have a great profession here, just a little bit of a pullback. I've heard some people refer to this as an ortho recession, but we will get out of it. Shannon's anticipating that the first half of 2025 is going to be pretty flat. But by the back half, meaning summertime, we're going to start to see consumers returning to the marketplace and possibly even with some pent-up demand. So I know I would love a repeat of 2022 or 2021. Those were both pretty good years for our practice. Best years we've ever had, in fact. So I'd love to see a little bit of a rebound there. How are you guys doing practice-wise? Is everyone doing okay?
Doing okay. Well, mine is down, but it's interesting. It's followed like the trajectory of my personal life, like down. Now it's up. Now it's up. So it's definitely following that. It really in my presence, how I've been showing up at the office has been, it's reflected on how the office has trended 100%. Sure. One way that I've always comforted myself, I guess, in times that are down too, is I feel like, I don't know, would you call this elastic? Orthodontic demand is elastic or inelastic? What would you say? Because it's like 2020, we felt there was that pullback, but it's like people are still going to get orthodontic treatment as long as our economy keeps going and we keep going. There's people are going to get treatment either for their children or themselves. So it's going to come back at some point. We just aren't seeing that now. So all those people that are waiting, sitting on the fence, they're going to come back in later on. I think that's what you were getting at. So I've kind of comforted myself with that.
Thinking back to economics, I think that would be an elastic demand curve,
okay,
right?
Yeah,
so very responsive to price differences, but I think consumer sentiment as well. Very elastic, very sensitive to consumer sentiment for sure.
But you're saying it's relatively inelastic because they're going to get treatment regardless.
Long term.
Yeah, long term, at some point they're going to get treatment. So we go through these waves where we feel like it's not there, and but at some point they're going to get it.
It's around the corner.
Children, yeah.
How are you doing, Brian? How are your
practice doing? So we were a little bit up last year in terms of our production and collections. This year, I think we're going to be about the same as last year, maybe slightly higher than last year. It's not the growth like we had been experiencing previous to the last several years, but. So that's where we've been.
How's your practice doing, Chris?
Kind of how I shared in the Ortho-Pedo pre-conference is I think being tied to pedo is a big key to the future. We fortunately are up a little bit. I know most areas in Arizona I think have been down a little bit from just what I've heard. I think our number of adults has been down a bit, like you said, but they put their kids first. And generally when you get a referral from a pediatric dentist that they love, the conversion rate is very high because they love their pediatric dentist versus finding you on Google and stuff. So I'm in a unique situation where I think that the pedo bubble has helped, but I would say the referrals from outside dentists has gone down. And I think that's because they're trying to do more cases in-house because they're feeling the effects of the economy as well.
100%. All right, braces guy.
Yeah, braces guy's doing okay. I mean, pretty consistent from last year. I've kind of gotten to the point where, knowing that everything is always changing. It's very rare to have a static anything, especially when it comes to this kind of stuff, right? Production. And if you're constantly growing and never stop growing, that's a problem too. If, for me, it would be, I don't want to do that. So I actually look at it when you have those moments where I wouldn't even call it dip. So maybe we've, scaled back a little bit or it's down a little bit. That's an opportunity to kind of, I've used those to be like, hey, let's use this time to maybe reassess certain things, not in the idea of, hey, we got to grow and panic and not view it as good or bad, but saying this is an opportunity for us to look through this.
It for sure is. Yeah. Every time that happens, I start thinking, what are we doing here? What are we doing there? I start tweaking things or adjusting things. But when everything's hunky dory, it's like we're good.
Absolutely.
Start buying your own press.
Always positive.
I don't have to fix anything. We're doing amazing. Yeah.
Think about like the stock market. You're going to ride the ups and downs, but overall your trend is up.
Yeah. Yes.
But you can't get emotionally invested in the lows, or it'll destroy you.
Sometimes you definitely get emotionally invested.
The last thing I want to say about that was there's a real opportunity for growth in the lows.
100%.
In the lows. We view it as this negative thing, but it's like, okay, so my leg's broken. I'm going to have some lows over the next few months. I'm going to have more time than I want, honestly. I would want to be working out or doing things that I can't do. So, what are these lows, quote unquote lows, going to provide me in terms of opportunities for growth that I otherwise wouldn't have? Yeah. Honestly,
you think about the time you would have been working on your legs. Now you can just all your biceps,
upper arms.
It's going to be
upper body
3 times the size of what they are now.
So disproportionate. It'll just be freakish. It'll be absolutely freakish.
Yeah, it will be for sure.
It's going to be.
I'm excited.
I don't like that I have to stand next to you on that stage. Especially on the shirt ripping stuff. That's not.
Yeah.
Just put me right in between both of you and you're set. Pretty good.
Well, that's great, guys. I mean, we have 2 practices, my wife and I, and what's interesting is my practice tends to be, I think we're probably 50-50 adult versus kids. A lot of dentist referrals where I practice, and my practice is definitely down. This is we're still single digit down, which is not the end of the world, and I think we're going to catch up fourth quarter a bit. But no one ever likes that. I mean, no matter how much I accept these ups and downs, it still gets in my head sometimes. My wife's practice, she's works with a pediatric dentist, and her practice is actually up a little bit. So again, testament to Chris's stuff. I mean, I guess the lesson here is if you can work with pedo, that's the way to go.
Your TikToks have been up though. I've been seeing those.
TikToks have been up.
Like you've been using that time to like do some creative ones. I've been seeing those coming. Those are
wow.
awesome.
Look at that.
Good
is
job.
high praise. We actually had our highest viewed TikTok. It's counting, but at last I checked, it was at 20,000 views.
Wow.
Which was great.
Man.
It was literally just me trolling
down in one
on
area,
some
up
girls
in others,
changing her own colors, and I think I was riding her wave more than anything else. But
we're all doing that.
But yeah, no, I'm getting.
Good job. Congrats.
We're getting there. Thank you. Yeah. Again, when things are down, you just got to do what's in your control, and for us, I guess that's TikToks.
I love it. Welcome.
Well, so we'll segue now into the meat of our discussion. So we were all on a ship together at the OP Summit just about 2 weeks ago, and we had some really good conversations there. I think one of my favorite things about these meetings, Ortho Pearls, OP Summit, AAO, whatever, is the conversations that happen outside of the actual lectures and this water cooler talk, so to speak. So we were talking a lot about our personal growth, our personal development. I know we all have a lot to share on this, but I'm just going to start off by acknowledging that I'm the personality guy, so I'm going to have to throw this in. Like, I think that everyone at this table, probably except for me, is going to fall in that Enneagram 3 category, which of course is the achiever. For those of us who don't know too much about Enneagram, I think Grant Collins knows about as much as any orthodontist I know. Could you tell us a little bit, just briefly, what an Enneagram 3 is and how that might apply to certain orthodontists?
Yeah, I think you'll find it very common in our industry. It's the achiever, so it's a lot of people are going to be pretty success driven, focused on image, but also just achievement, and that there's an underlying fear of failure. And we call it personality, but what it really is your ego. It's not something to hate, but it's something that you developed when you were younger to find a way to fit into the world, and it really is something that you're just finding a sense of belonging somehow. So we've created these personality structures, and a lot of people were taught early on that success is love, or success is value, or success is worthiness. And so we're just carrying that over into our adult lives through our professions. So threes will be common in that area, and will oftentimes be conscious of image, conscious of being able to adapt to appear successful or do whatever we need to do to be seen that way, because that's important, because we've associated our value with that. That's not true. Your value is, is essence of being, essence of who you are. But until you've kind of been self-aware enough to discover that and really see the Enneagram 3 ego for what it is, it really does feel like truth.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I think Enneagram 3, just in a nutshell, that you identify with your achievements. Would you say that's a succinct way of saying that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You take those away, it leaves you raw. And same with the fear of failure. Any image of failure is like death. So again, it's ironically, as Brian and I have discussed, sometimes the failure is the means in which to grow. So now you've faced that. You've now disassociated from the success being your identity, and now our identity is no longer tied to that.
Yeah.
So the growth isn't to become an Enneagram 3. It's not for us to sit around and be like, look who's more 3 than who. It's to become more self-aware so that we're not held in this box forever.
When I hear that, I'm thinking how we tend to become over-identified with our personalities. We start to think this is who we are.
Absolutely.
That's not the case. It could actually be blinding sometimes to the true self.
Yeah, it becomes a party game in itself, right? Where it's
Yes.
like, this is who I am. Who are you? Let's create our identity, and now I feel safe because of that.
Yeah. And I mean, there's memes about it and everything. I love sharing those memes.
Yep, exactly.
Well, Jacob, I know you've got an interesting story when it comes to over-identifying with your achievements, with your outward persona, how you look, how you come off to people. Can you tell me a little bit about how that has applied to your life, where you've, over-identified perhaps?
Where do you want me to go with this? With
the bodybuilding. Start with the bodybuilding.
Let's go right to the bodybuilding.
You look great.
Kind of actually, the bodybuilding thing, it's interesting. I mean, that was like making up for, I was like a chunky kid, severe. I just had major body dysmorphia. And I guess I wanted to prove to myself that I could conquer this. But also, once I did, then I made this post on social media. And I remember my intention with making that post. I had it planned out, but I didn't do it. I made it this like, look at my accomplishment. I kind of thought, I'm going to make this post and I'm going to inspire people and look at what I did, look at what I overcame. But I don't know how it came across. I think that if I went back and if I did that if I did the social media. I'm not much of a social media poster, but I realize now I did that. It was like it was an ego post. So Grant, you helped me realize just the things that you said. It was an ego post because I remember I was like checking how many likes did I get, how many comments did I get, all that stuff. It's like, geez, I was in this frenzy that I wasn't used to because I didn't post much on social media. But I realized that if I went back and I could do that again, so I made this post where I showed it was the day that I looked the best, and it was like 2 days before my second competition. I didn't give the full picture of that post because on that day where I looked the best, I felt the absolute worst. I went into my office, I was just miserable. Everyone can tell. That whole week and month before, I was grumpy. I was a curmudgeon. It was awful. So yeah, you saw this social media like facade. Mm-hmm. I remember I had this intention to make it this enlightening example of you can't believe everything you see when you see all these Instagram photos and representations of people's lives. Like, yeah, you see that, but it's not what's going on behind the scenes, because it was not a positive time in my life. And yeah, I achieved this thing and it looked great and glorious. And I know it made some people feel bad. I remember it was like a cousin who like went and apologized to his spouse for not taking care of his body. I'm like, dude, what I had to go through with this was it was horrible. So just that facade, I think it's so easy to get on social media and see what someone's doing or what's being posted and then feel bad about your life and think that everything's perfect and everything's great. But in reality, there's stuff going on behind the scenes, or there's just junk going on behind the scenes. I mean, I was a very like lopsided time in my life, and things weren't in order outside of that. So I wish I could have portrayed that. It was very instructive for me, because now when I see social media posts or things like people living the glamorous life, I think, well, maybe it's not all roses, like what's really going on behind the scenes. It's not all that way. We all can portray the perfect life, but how many of us are living this perfect life? No, we're all struggling.
It's kind of interesting too. You can take that concept, and I've been there too, where it's like you go through, you see these posts, and then you got to ask yourself, well, why is my joy tied to whether their life's going great or not, even in their posts.
Whether their life is going great or not?
Yeah. Why do I have to convince myself that their life isn't as perfect as it is for me to find my joy?
Yeah. Why is it cathartic to hear that Jacob was actually miserable?
Yeah. But that's telling more about me in this moment, right?
Yeah, it's
kind of is.
Maybe we should analyze that.
Hey, you post what you want to. How I interpret it is my issue now.
Yeah.
But you're right. Okay. But there's two sides to it. You're totally right, because we've all been there. We've all done that. But then there's such a subtle energy behind it. Am I posting for validation, or am I posting just because I'm proud of this moment? Only you know that story, and it's okay regardless, right?
Yeah. And when you mentioned posting, originally your intention was to inspire. Well, you may not know this when I told you, but that post inspired me to do a bodybuilding competition. So you might have thought that you went to inspire. I think we as Enneagram 3s tend to overanalyze what we do. And you might have thought about, did I come off as pretentious and whatnot? And I didn't give the whole picture. But then you inspired me, and I reached out and I said, what do I do? You said, hire this coach, do exactly what he said. I did it. I did a competition. It was an amazing achievement. I felt the worst day of my life when I did it, realized it wasn't sustainable. I went through all the things you did, but I wouldn't have done it if it wasn't for that post. So
hey, that was cool. Thank you.
That was a cool twist on that.
That's a cool twist. You inspired him. That was cool as you look back at that.
What I'm seeing here, and one thing I wanted to chime in on is there's always a yin and a yang to everything, right? There's always a light and a dark, right? So original motivation to inspire was quote unquote good, right? But then there was another side that if we're judgmental, we say, well, that's bad. Well, it wasn't bad. Like Grant said, having an ego is necessary. You have to have an ego structure. Yeah. You have to have something that you can define, so then you can add yourself back to the whole and take a place and not just be some amorphous blob, right? So you have to actually work out, who am I? What are my preferences? What am I like? But then not become too attached to it, not become too identified with it. But you have to become something and someone, so that when you go out and you engage with the world, you're a part that fits. somewhere,
You
right?
need an operating system, I think is what it comes down to.
Right.
I think of
Essentially.
personalities a lot of times as an operating system. It's what we've learned, how we've learned to interact with our environment, how we've learned to identify ourselves compared to other people, which is necessary, on some level.
It's
Well, there's an
necessary.
element too of like once you learn this stuff, it's easy to get into the idea. You identify with the ego, then you almost hate the ego for a while. You repress it, and it backfires in another way.
That's another part of the ego.
Yeah, so it's another part of the ego. It's just another version of the ego. So what if, like you said, instead of creating a bad relationship with the ego, we accept it to some degree, but don't identify with it, like you said.
Right.
You unattach to the ego, and you can say, hey, that's a part of me. Great. But I'm not going to become this as my identity.
I think one thing that's really important is
He's got something.
I think one thing that's really important is accepting that we're all normal. One thing that's been very liberating for me,
Amen.
Because when we say, well, this person's abnormally happy or they're abnormally successful, well, in an area that we're seeing, but they're normal, just like you're normal. They have their hard times, their ugly things, just like we have our hard times, our ugly things. They have a light about them. They also have a shadow. We have a light, we have a shadow. We're just normal. We're just totally normal. And to say, for me, that's been a way that I can disidentify with my ego and still want to be better because I want to be a more enlightened version of myself, which is not fear-driven, which is not ego-driven, but can recognize there's an ego and can recognize there's fear. But, I'm just pretty normal. And so the things I do that suck, okay, I don't want to suck anymore. I want to be better. But it's pretty normal. Everyone sucks at things. Okay. And even the things that are successful. I've had this conversation with my girlfriend, Diana. We've talked about each of us in some way would be defined as exceptional. And probably in the United States as a whole, in some ways we'd be put on a pedestal. They're more educated. They're more wealthy, this, that, or the other. The reality is those are just things that we've learned to judge as good, but we probably suck at a lot of things that people that are in a different situation are much better than we are. So to say that one's good and one's bad, or we're better and they're better, I think we're all normal. We all have pros and cons. We all have light and dark.
We know the full story.
And
Well, and I guess something that came up for me, and maybe this is Enneagram Type 3, and I haven't taken the Enneagram. You guys are telling me, Andy's telling me I'm Enneagram Type 3. Maybe I'm
identify your
part of
ego
that.
for you, Jacob.
Thank you.
That's what I do as well.
But I find it's funny. We get into these ego conversations, and I find I have this, and it's akin to my fear in my orthodontic practice. I have this fear of failure. I definitely have an intense fear of failure. I imagine entrepreneur. It's like this entrepreneurial fear. Everything's going to come crashing down, and so it's like I'm always running scared. I kind of joke I'm running scared. So I have this fear of letting go of that because I think it drives me and it keeps me going and want to. So I almost had this fear of letting go of ego too, because I'm thinking, but it drives me to do good things or positive things. So I don't know if is that a normal thing to have a fear of letting go of your ego, or
you identify with that really a lot. So I tell this story of. I've gone through moments in my life where I was just motivated by pure crisis, where the shit hits the fan, and that's when I feel like I'm at my best, and I think that developed in me this idea that I have to constantly stay in a state of crisis just to be functional, just to
that's
do
kind of what it is. It's like, this is good.
It puts you in such a negative headspace when you're there. Like, I remember when I first started up my practice, we started up in Phoenix, Arizona. Chris knows this is like one of, if not the most competitive, one of the most competitive areas in the country.
Yeah.
I was watching other people who started up around the same time as me, and they were just like killing it. Like they were profitable by month 6, and by 2 years they were already like buying these massive houses and stuff. And I'm like, man, I'm still not sure if I'm even going to make it. A few years down that path, we were doing okay, but I got so demoralized just beating myself up, saying, you're not good enough. You suck. Like, look at your numbers. This is crap. And if you want to be any kind of success, you got to work harder than this. You got to and I was already working as hard as I could. And I just remember I was working out when I did that, and I just slowly just stopped. I lost the strength to even continue. And I sat in the corner just feeling so down on myself, and I was like, I'm going to quit. I'm going to sell the practice. I can't do this anymore. And in that moment, it was sort of was a reset for me. And I thought, this motivation that I'm using, this crisis that's always chasing me to do better, to work hard, is now causing me to quit. It's causing me to give up on my dream of being a practice owner. It's causing me to throw away everything that I've built. And what is the alternative? Do I go back as an associate? I'm definitely doing better than I was as an associate. And it made me recognize that I can't be motivated by this constant fear of crisis anymore. But then what do you replace that with? That's a challenge as well.
Well, I think what's interesting too with what you're saying, what I'm hearing is something we probably all have experienced, where it's like you have this comparison and we've defined what we should be doing or where we should be at 6 months. If you, like literally, if we didn't know anything else outside of what we're doing, we all have it made. Like if you didn't know percentages, or you didn't have somebody telling you what percentage your staff should be at this and that, or I'm not looking at your practice and this practice or where I should be at 6 months, you always have a reason to be content. It's like Eckhart says, once you've defined something, you've lost the magic of just being as it is. It's like he talks about, I mean, this is a little woo-woo, but he talks about as soon as you, like if you see a bird, right? If you see a cardinal, and the most magical time that bird would be is before you know what it is. You see a red bird and you don't know how to describe it because it just is. And then once you see a cardinal, now every time you see a cardinal, it's a cardinal. There's just another cardinal. Our practices have become that to some degree, where we've defined so much of what success looks like or where we should be or whatever it should be. You're constantly measuring yourself up to that to see if you're okay.
That's a great point. Like, why am I not just okay?
Well, the knowledge and connectedness we have is a two-edged sword, because the knowledge and connectedness allows us to create greater practice than we ever would have been able to 10, 20, 30 years ago. But then we're comparing, and it's digging into us. We're thinking, why am I not doing this? Why am I not doing that?
And why can't we compare to the food industry is barely making ends meet all the time. If I'm compared to them, I'm doing great, right? Yeah. So it's like, it's just all defined of how you want to view it.
There was an orthodontist who shall not be named from several years ago who said that...
Brian? Oh, sorry, different guy. Oh, it's not Brian.
Was it something really controversial?
Oh, something really controversial, Brian.
Say that again, Andy?
It was Ben Burris, of course. Regardless of how you feel about Ben, he was very influential when I graduated.
What did he say? I didn't hear what you said.
So he said that if you can see someone else doing it, you know it's possible. He didn't necessarily start the Facebook groups, but he definitely made them very mainstream. His messaging was very strong when I first came out of residency, and I was starting a practice. I had no mentorship, no idea what I was doing, and I have all these resources all of a sudden, and it was great for me. I mean, I don't know how I would have done it without that knowledge, and without him pushing and showing those kinds of things. Now, of course, that's a double-edged sword, because you fall into that FOMO really quick, and I think...
Well, just because someone else is doing something doesn't mean you should be doing it. Just
right.
I mean, you could do it.
Yeah.
You could do it. Yeah. But should you do it? I prefer to take the mindset on that, like as far as you see someone doing something, or like the positive mindset of, I mean, there's like a thing that Zig Ziglar says. He says a positive mindset doesn't allow you to do anything, but allows you to do everything better than you would with a negative mindset. Yeah. So I don't know. Just because someone's doing something doesn't mean you should. I would add that to it. Like, you can do it, yes, but...
I mean, that's...
Is that right for you?
It's interesting. I gave this a lot of thought, a while ago, and I wrote, I think it was an article for OrthoTown, or maybe it was a lecture or something, but it was sort of about rewriting the rules of success, because if we're looking at just numbers and we're looking at, how other people are doing, we're constantly comparing that, it's a never-ending trek.
Yeah. There's always a bigger fish.
There's always a bigger fish. Exactly right. I can always compare myself to someone bigger. I might feel, I work out and I feel pretty good about myself until I hang out with Brian. Then I'm like, well, now I feel like a little...
I just have to lift my shirt and show my belly. That's all I got to do.
I wish you would, because I could use some of that Schadenfreude every now and then.
Make you feel better. I'll be happy to show you after the podcast. You'll be unimpressed.
Pot belly old guy. Yeah. What was it you said a while ago? You said it doesn't matter how big your stomach is as long as your arms are big, or
what
something
I said
like that.
A wise man told me one time, very wise man, he said, as a dude, you can kind of have a little bit of a gut as long as you got big arms.
Okay.
I did say that, didn't I? All right.
That's right. It was you, man.
Grant, you said that?
I'll go by wise man if you want, but that's fine. I'm good.
Where's your gut, Grant? Where's your...
I hide it underneath the layers of clothing.
I mean, that ice cream's got to be going somewhere.
It does.
One thing I wanted to say about what Jacob was saying, and again, this goes back to the theme of there's a yin and a yang, there's a light and a dark, there's a balance.
Yeah.
Things have to be balanced.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. It's simultaneously good that we have people to measure ourselves against, right? Yeah. You need to be inspired.
Yes.
So why do we watch the Olympics? We watch the Olympics because we like to see what are human beings capable of. Why do you go visit an amazing cathedral in Europe? what are human beings capable? Why would you go to the pyramids? What are human beings capable of? Now, what did it take to get there, right?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of suffering, probably a lot of neurosis, probably a lot of stuff along the way that's not pleasant.
I think we all have that.
Wow.
We all have to build a cathedral, right?
I think every orthodontist who's listening to this podcast, every orthodontist who's listening to this podcast. But I think the reality is, again, to not reject it as well. It's then bad to compare.
Yeah.
Well, it's not bad.
Yeah.
It's only bad if it's fueling something in you that judges your self-worth based on it.
Yep. Exactly.
Like Chris did with Jacob.
Yeah.
Hey, look at what he accomplished. Man, that's awesome. I want to accomplish that. He didn't think, now I feel bad about myself, so I need to go. Yeah. I know the kind of person Chris is. He probably didn't feel bad about himself at all. He probably just thought, you know what? I can be better, and so I'm going to.
Yeah.
So there's something that's good about it, but there's also a dark side to it. And it's mostly dark when you're not aware of it. But if you're aware of it, you can then separate yourself. Hey, this is cool that they did that. You can actually be happy for somebody that they're successful. And you can be inspired by it, not threatened by it, because when you're threatened by it, it's only your own sense of inadequacy. It's only your own ego that's threatened, that somehow you're less than, you're not as good. Or when you achieve it, hey, look, I'm better than. No, you're not. You're just the same as everybody else. Well,
and that's just it. You can. I heard a thing from Tony Robbins years ago is that you can achieve anything anyone else has because we all have the same nervous system. We all have the same resources, pretty much, like physical resources, ability to go achieve. And as long as you don't identify with that to where it defines your value, like you said, or who you are, it can actually be great fuel to have that disturbance. Like you said, some of your best times of really pushing your practice when you were down. It gives you that fuel. But then if you're not successful, how do we then say, this is part of the process? I've got to have these dips.
I like this idea that it's not good or bad. Obviously, with Jacob's experience, we mentioned two different people who went in two completely opposite directions with it. I mean, for Chris, it's been inspirational. For your cousin, was it? It
was a negative thing.
Very negative. This kind of harkens back to one of my favorite books, The Obstacle is the Way. Have you guys read that, Ryan Holiday?
Great book.
Oh, I highly recommend this one. It kind of comes down to, I'm not going to get into the whole philosophy here, but where it applies is that you see something in front of you, a rock in the road, and you can either say like, well, that sucks, I can't get past this thing, or you can use that to innovate and figure out a new way around it, maybe even a better way. But the bottom line is, if you look at your quote unquote problems more as challenges, then you can channel that same energy in a more positive direction. So you see someone and I think that largely comes down to our mindset. We could look at Jacob's post and see it as demotivational. No matter how much I work out, I'm never going to look like that, so why should I even try? Or you could look at it and say, wow, look at the change that he had. Like, look at him before and look at him after. And even if I'm not going to be, look, no amount of working out is, how tall are you, Jacob? 6'3"? 6'2", okay. No amount of working out is going to make me 6'2", right? And I can say, well, then I'm just going to give up. What's the point? Or I can say, look at that transformation, and if I followed those same protocols, maybe not to that extreme.
Shoes you could get, though. That get you there.
I have them, Grant. I'm literally wearing them right now. This is as tall as I get.
Strangely enough, I get Facebook ads on those.
Right.
I just wanted to throw that out there.
Something I would say to add to that, and I was talking to you, Andy, about this mindset shift. So I told you about how I saw you, and I don't know if it's you or Chris's or you guys posts about you guys when you guys were out to dinner, because we were friends on Facebook. I saw you guys at dinner and I got jealous. I was like, man, I wish I had an orthodontist best buddy in town, living in my town. I got all jealous, you guys. But then I thought, no, that's not, I don't need to be jealous. Like, I'm sure we both have things that we could be jealous of. We all have things we could be jealous of. But then I just tried to turn it into, I'm really happy for them. I'm happy for them. Like, I shouldn't be jealous. I'm happy for them.
There's something to be said about too in this moment, being, don't judge whatever your response is. Like, jealous, happy, just use it for your own awareness.
Yeah.
And now it's like, hey, it looks like I'm getting triggered. Thank you for that gift.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a gift. You see those things and you say, I want to incorporate some of that in my life, but I'm not jealous because you have it. It's more of, oh, I really like that Jake has that. How can I obtain that if it's something that I feel will add to my life?
You can also move to Rochester. I'll be your best buddy anytime. Just come straight down the street. You're a good dude. I like you, man. So
another thing I was going to say is I look at someone like you, Grant. I look at what you do, what you've done with TikTok, things like that, and I'm like, I've accepted. I'll never be that, or maybe I don't need to be that, or I shouldn't be that, but I have to. I'm trying to do that mindset shift of that's awesome, that's fantastic. I'm really happy for you. It's amazing what you've done. Like that's an incredible talent. So it's so easy to get into that jealousy mindset. Maybe it's just me, or maybe that's human nature. I don't know, but I'm trying to work on that shift into happiness and just celebrating. And it's kind of an abundance mindset. Like, hey, there's enough happiness and joy, and just because someone else has that doesn't take away from me. So,
if you're an orthodontist that wants to connect with over 500 colleagues, hear over 30 of the best speakers in orthodontics, including the braces guy, Dr. Grant Collins, who you've heard on this podcast, and see 50 of the most cutting-edge exhibits, have a chance to win some of over $70,000 worth of prizes, including a trip to Kauai, and enjoy the absolute best parties in orthodontics, you won't want to miss the 7th Annual MOPC, the Mother of Pearls Conference, coming this October 9th through 11th. We're going big for our 7th year by renting out the Astronaut Memorial Foundation at the Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida. This is the hub for NASA, where they train more astronauts than anywhere else in the world, and SpaceX launches occur all the time. We toured the campus, and let me tell you, it's like the Disney World of space, with theme park attractions, actual space shuttles, interactive exhibits, and real astronauts. On top of the best speakers, we'll be having our world-famous Friday Night Pearls party under the Saturn Apollo 5 rocket, with dinner, drinks, space-themed activities, and live music from the world's only all-orthodontist band, Relapse. Early bird prices are about to go up for every 100 tickets sold and have already gone up twice. Be sure to register today with your team at orthodonticpearls.org to get the best price for the best conference in orthodontics. Plus, we are the only conference with worry-free registration. If anything comes up and you can't make it for any reason, you can transfer your registration to next year's conference absolutely free. It's a no-brainer. So be sure to lock in your best price by registering you and your team for the best conference in orthodontics, the Mother of Pearls Conference, at orthodonticpearls.org today.
You mentioned happiness. I really wonder, Grant, what are your thoughts on that? Like, do you think happiness is the goal? Is that what we should be striving after, or is there something else maybe?
I think oftentimes society makes us think that should be the goal, and then gives us all these things to try to get there. And we buy into that thinking this, and this, because we enjoy the hit of happiness. But really, I think there's an element of, and that's just one emotion of the array of humanity and being human. Mm-hmm. So incorporating and loving all the emotions that go with that. And I think we've talked about this before. What if it's more about, finding a state of peace or joy, and not getting tied to it so much that becomes another form of your identity, but saying, I love being in the vibrational energy of joy and peace. That's great. Mm-hmm. I love that. And the happiness that comes, great. The sadness that comes at times, also great. Because the more you incorporate that, the more you inclusively, enjoy all parts of you, the more I think you do get to states of peace, joy, of being. And then you're not tied to that emotion that becomes another pressure to be happy. Not something humans are capable of, is being in a constant state of happiness.
It's almost like that's a state of hedonism, to be happy all the time, to seek pleasure all the time, which is definitely one of the baser desires, not something that is
trauma response, right?
You can't expect to ever have that be a stable
we generally
situation.
come back to baseline or the middle, right?
Exactly.
I mean, you can't always come back to baseline, whether it's down or up.
Yeah, it's regression to the mean.
Regression to the mean. Whether it's down or up, that's a great thing. You can know if you're down, you do well regress to the mean.
Right.
You're going to come back up. But it's important to remember that when you're in that that happy state, it's not achievable to stay in that forever, and that's okay. It's the way it is.
It's so interesting because I feel like, oftentimes I think we get into states where we're not happy, and then we start chasing it. And that's where you forget to be inclusive and enjoy the middle way, like Buddha says, the middle way, or the yin and the yang of humanity, of who you are. Mm-hmm. And then if, what sometimes happens is then you repress the parts of you. You associate whatever you're feeling in this moment. It might be sadness. It might be pain. It might be something. We're just trying to get rid of that in some way by covering it up with happiness. When I think really the acceptance is, we were just talking about this, sometimes acceptance of as is, exactly as is the thing that moves you through that quicker, versus just jumping to something because you don't want to be in this state, which easier said than done. Trust me. Sure. Ask me how I know. I mean, we've all been there, and I still struggle with that.
Well, I know, Grant, you recommended a book to me, Tolle, or is it Tolle?
Tolle. Yeah,
Tolle,
yeah.
I
heard the Germans actually Tolle.
Tolle?
I don't know. It's not Tolle.
It's a German accent. Is that what I'm hearing on that?
Tolle is what I heard. It's a German accent. Yeah, he's a German guy.
He's got a very distinctive accent.
I just wanted to say something. I got to sign off here. Chris and I are going to go end the meeting. It's been a pleasure to be with you guys. And I know everybody here, fairly well. Speaking of happiness, I feel like the reason that's not the goal is I, just like each of you to some degree or another in the last few years, have had some things happen in my life. And I've had some people would say it would be traditionally negative things that have been hard. And if my goal was happiness, I wouldn't have grown to the same degree that I have. And I'm really grateful for that. And I've seen that in each of you guys too, the negatives, quote unquote negatives, the hard things, the difficult things, the failures, the crashing and burnings have actually been wonderful because that provides an opportunity for a rebirth. Mm-hmm. And so if you're seeking happiness all the time, like Grant said, I think you can actually mask opportunities for growth. You can cover up opportunities for growth because it's like this toxic happiness that you're chasing something to always be this way and you don't ever have this period of downtime or this period of rest or this period of death that you can then resurrect and become something different, better. Yeah. And so I'm actually really grateful for it. And I know that each of you guys, it's been hearing, getting to know your journeys a little bit and getting to know you guys, it's been actually really, really wonderful. And I think we're at the phase in our lives that we're starting to pick up on this stuff. And you think, I wish I would have known before, but guess what? We weren't ready before. We had to do all that first half of life stuff. We had to form the ego. We had to have the success. Yeah. And then you have the failures and you realize it's not all about success. Oh, wow. In fact, the failures are good.
The failures are the really, really negative things, and the things that I just did not want ever to happen or couldn't imagine happening, they happened, and it actually, they were actually the best thing that could have happened. It turned out it's the best thing that could have happened because
It's funny how that happens. Like sometimes the things you're running from are exactly what you need. And I think that, that's a tough place to get to, where you're grateful for your misfortune. But, this balance between light and dark, between our ego and our shadow self, I think the shadow self is, of course, those repressed parts of us that we don't really want to admit, and definitely not to others, but maybe not even to ourselves that they exist. So we repress them, we push them down. They come out in weird ways. The more you repress it, you'll have this outburst and you're like, that wasn't me. Well, it was. That's somewhere inside of you. And the more that you refuse to acknowledge it, the more it just starts to fester, and then it just explodes at some point.
We look at some of those lower frequency energies, the energy scale. I forgot who did that. Hawkins has the energy scale, the map of consciousness.
You showed me that once. Yeah. I don't remember it very well.
Yeah, so it's got the lower energies, shame, guilt, fear, and then it goes up to anger. And anger's right before courage. So you look at, sometimes, it sounds crazy, but accepting those lower vibrational energies as part of you as well allows you to move through the energy scale.
Yes.
So you look at anger. Anger often is a means to get to the next level, which is courage, to take action. So anger is a necessary thing sometimes. It doesn't mean you need to be in a constant state of anger. I think that'd be hard to feel joy and a sense of, it'd be more force energy rather than power energy. But there's an inclusivity to all the energies that allow you to now experience the whole map of consciousness, the whole map of energy, and allow you to, like we said, there's going to be ebbs and flows, just like in a practice. Same with your energetic vibration. And having those dips and then knowing that the trend is oftentimes still upward, but accepting that it's not going to be a straight path, and nor does it need to be.
Fascinating. The idea of anger can be a stepping stone into courage.
Yeah.
Not always, but it can be. That's
or it can be a stepping stone down if you're not careful too, right? But yeah, you're right.
That's interesting. Yeah. Go backwards as well. That energy graph I thought was very fascinating. How you can graduate up through these emotions, but you have to pass through one to get to the other. And the more you deny it, the more you don't work through it, because you're not going to work through a challenge that you deny exists.
Right.
We were talking about regression to the mean, and how, I noticed that everything in life is just waves. Yeah. It's ups and downs. As cliche as that sounds, let's think about that. In physics, every particle has a wave pattern to it. There's economic cycles, there's emotional cycles, hormonal cycles. Yeah. Nothing is permanent. I think that's something I've really tried to embrace lately, is this idea of impermanence.
100%.
And with intention and with study and understanding, we talk about this regression to the mean. I think that if we can have, a shallow slope or any kind of slope to that mean, that mean line, and then accept that we're going to have this second oscillating line around it. So sometimes we're going to feel like we're down, but we're still, if we're committed to improvement, we're going to get back to that mean and then even exceed it. But then it's going to come down again too. It's just, I heard a great line by Morgan Housel. He's a columnist for Wall Street Journal, and he's written a couple of books. Recently, I was reading his book, Same as Ever, which is highly recommended. Mm-hmm. But he says that every state of the cycle carries within it the seeds of its own destruction. Mm-hmm. And that's whether you're up or whether you're down. When you're up, you start to get complacent. Mm-hmm. We all worked really hard to get to that place of success, mainly so that we could let go of some of that anxiety, mainly so that we don't have to be stressed out all the time. We don't have to be burning all the time. We want some time to have some peace. But as soon as you let go of that anxiety that got you there, you're a little bit taking your foot off the gas. Yeah. And it won't happen right away, but you will start to stagnate and then maybe even start to decline if you don't re-adhere to those things that got you there. Unfortunately, some of that motivation does come from what we'd consider negative feelings.
Or even not over-identifying with either.
Yeah.
And just saying, hey, I'm not going to over-identify with the success I'm in this moment or the failure. And then even to what you said, the oscillating thing, that's huge, because we talked a few minutes ago about, hey, the goal is not happiness, but then being careful not to make the goal enlightenment or peace or joy too, because that's just another form of a goal that's static. Mm-hmm. And now we have another position that is very impossible as a human to stay in that state of enlightenment at all times. I mean, it's like you'll get moments of it, peace, joy, but then not to make that the end all of a constant state of being.
Yeah, because there is no constant state of being. It doesn't exist.
I'm still mulling on the anger as a stepping stone to courage. Well, you know why? Okay, bringing it back to orthodontics, what I'm thinking about, it comes back to your talk yesterday, Grant. I mean, I'm thinking about, I've gone through this period, even the past 3-4 months, where I finally have gotten to where I've gotten almost like angry or so frustrated with all of the patients that I've done all I can to make them happy, but they're never happy. Yeah. All the, the patients we have that have body dysmorphia and or translated onto their teeth. I don't know. Is there a technical term for that? Call it body dysmorphia, tooth body dysmorphia. I don't know. There's got to be some kind of term we all have it. But I've gone through this anger, but then I've channeled it. I've turned it to, wait a minute. No, it's kind of becoming now. I'm becoming a lot more courageous to be honest with them. Just be honest with them. Be honest. Be more straightforward. And Grant, you gave a lot of great phrases for that. But
Thank you,
but I'm finding that courage to just be much more honest. Well, and everywhere, but especially also not especially, but with these patients, I'm finding that honesty is really helping a lot. It's helping me get out of some hairy situations, helping avoid getting into hairy situations. So
there's a podcast. Brene Brown did it with.
We're not promoting other podcasts.
Oh,
just so you know.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm sorry. Yeah,
I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
It's like the third best podcast right behind this one and the one.
But you're saying we're number 2?
We're number 1.
All right, there we go. So 2 spots behind us. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah, carry on. Yeah. I mean, this is my last time I'm invited on this podcast. Yeah. But it was really interesting. They said how these emotions that we experience, which is just energy in different ways, need to be processed. You need like a tunnel. Like it's like you need to go through. So if you look at anger, to really process it and release it and let it like sit in your body and move through that energy, it doesn't mean you go out and direct it at someone else. It's you allow yourself to feel it in its fullness within yourself. And that energy gets released or grounded or moved through the tunnel. So, because oftentimes what happens is you over-identify with anger being because of this person, I am angry. Really, that's assigning your emotion to something outside of you, which is really tricky because now you're going to constantly seek it doesn't mean you can't be angry with a person, but you own the emotion within you to allow it to process and relieve. You can be like, I am so, like, this happened to me. I am so angry, and own the emotion at that moment. So now you've owned the energy in that allows you to step through courage a lot quicker. I've been there myself, where you tie it to a person or a thing, and it never goes away because you just constantly use it as a state of almost outsourcing your feelings. You blame. Your victim blame mentality will keep you in low vibrational energy. So to move through it, own the emotion, own the energy yourself, let it release. Don't tie it to that person eventually, even if you're angry or thing or whatever happened, circumstance. And you get to move through it to courage. You get to move through it to someone else.
I mean, what I'm realizing is I'm sitting here being angry at these people, but if I own it, I realize I'm the one that created this situation in the first place. Because but if I just blame them, it's because they're this way, it's because they're that way, then I'm not going to move past that. But accepting that blame,
that situation, even the idea that you created that situation, I would almost say that it's more like you allowed yourself to succumb to those feelings that the situation, because you're still tying it to a situation, right? Like if I created that, well, now I'm angry at the situation. That's still something external to me. But the truth of the matter is those are emotions that you're feeling. And here's a great example. I mean, my wife has been a huge learning experience for me. Chris has been a huge learning experience for me. Like all you guys. It's interesting how something will happen to us. We'll be out and I'll respond one way and my wife will respond an entirely different way. And I'm an Enneagram 8, that's an anger-driven, and I'm starting to appreciate where that anger comes out. I'm not an overtly like angry yelling at you kind of guy, but I have become more conscious of the way that anger drives so much of my motivation. So when something will happen, an inconvenience or really the thing that really sets me off is when someone derails me from a goal, from a trajectory. If I'm laser focused, I want to get there streamlined. I want to get there fast. And anything that gets in my way, I lose my temper over.
It's an obstacle, Andy.
I know, right? I know. It's this is where that work comes from, right? Is redefining that as a challenge. But it makes me appreciate the fact that I am creating those emotions in my own head. That's not that external thing. So again, obstacle is the way. That's what it comes down to. I look at my wife and she's like, it's no big deal. And she's a 9. She's a peacekeeper. She's going to maneuver around it however she wants, or at least at the end of the day, not let it derail her from her mission.
Is, this is more Enneagram stuff. 9s are in the anger triad too.
They
just use it. They process it differently. Yours is coming out where hers is getting directed inward.
Exactly.
Almost. But it's there. It's there.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to. Is like, are we the masters of our own domain, to quote Seinfeld? Everyone see that episode? Anyway, completely unrelated, but
this is such a normal talk for us. This is
I know.
So funny about it. This is totally. You just keep going for another hour, and
we definitely could. Yeah, guys, I think this has been a really cool experience for me. I know we literally could go on for about 3 hours like this. I would like to wrap up the podcast here, and of course, Brian and Chris, they have to go close down the meeting, so they're not here. But I'd like to go around and just offer some advice for how we can stay in control of those emotions when they get the better of us, or how do we combat that ego, that FOMO that we're always feeling. What advice would you learned doctors have for our audience on how to accomplish this?
So I think for me, what's worked for me, I think something might resonate differently, but for me, awareness has been huge, learning myself and observing myself and just being aware, almost like a third-party observer of my own emotions that do come up and not judge them too much. But then I think the two biggest things by far, presence and gratitude. Being present as is, acceptance, that's huge. And then that awareness will lead you to do, and when you're completely present, you're not living in the future or the past, which is oftentimes where the emotions come from anyway. And you say, what I have right now in front of me is all I need to be who I am right now. And you really always have what you need in this moment. And so that presence and then being grateful for that, to me, has helped me a ton. I mean, there's some things, you can learn. There's people out there who can teach you how to emotionally regulate, going on a walk, moving energy through things, tapping, nervous system, deregulation. I think there's a lot of things out there that I'm not super qualified to probably comment on, but there are resources out there to help people. But those are the things that help me a lot.
That's awesome. So staying present, being aware, practicing that awareness.
And gratitude.
Yeah, gratitude's a big one.
It is.
What are your thoughts, Jacob?
On fear of missing out, or
how do we push against that fear of missing out? How do we push against our egos and that drive that we need to be this idea that of success that we've defined kind of arbitrarily? How do we push against those negative emotions?
I'm still figuring that out, but I do feel like over time, what's coming to mind is I'm thinking about how many the sky is falling moments I've had over the past. I've been practicing for 13 years now. And I've had just a lot of the sky is falling moments, and thinking that our industries, how much change. I still find myself subject to it a little bit, but I guess just time and that perspective of realizing, no, it's not. Yes, things change fast, but it's not changing as fast as it's portrayed to us. And I think a lot of times we get, I guess I'm thinking about like vendors and sales. We sometimes get pitched something and it's like, you're going to miss out. If you don't miss out, you're going to miss the wave. You're going to miss out on this thing, and you're going to get left behind or left in the dust. And I found that most of that is just,
sales tactics.
It's sales.
FOMO is a sales tactic.
Yeah, and it's scaring us, and it's scaring us into following a trend in a way. It worked on me some. I guess part of it's just listening to older, wiser people.
Yeah.
Listening to older white people, they're like, we've seen this before. We've seen the same story before. Like, it's that you see these cycles through an industry. And maybe this time's different. Who knows? But I'm still figuring that one out.
Yeah,
but
I think we all are.
I would say that one of the most helpful things for me for my contentedness has been a meditation. Like one thing that I noticed at my office, I'm way calmer after having done a lot of meditation, because I used to sit there. I'd be on one side of the room and I'd look across the room and I'd notice this mom just sitting there with upset look on her face. I think she's upset, she's angry, she's this, she's that. But after doing a lot of meditation, I can recognize that thought and just let it go and come back to what I'm doing in that presence. And that is presence. Again, that's presence. So the more present I am, I'm going to focus here on this patient, on this thing, and not worry about the mom who I think is angry. And by the time I get over there, she's actually happy. She was just sitting there with a grumpy look. Like I think I have a grumpy look normally on my face, but
I know I do. I've been accused of that.
Yeah, I've been told. Like, people at my office are like, people get scared of you, Dr. Koch. Like, you get all focused.
I'm glad you brought up that meditation as well, because that's huge. It's really just intentional presence. And it's when I first learned this, it's like there's so many ways to do it. There can be guided meditations. You can do silent meditations. People do it for 15 minutes, an hour, nature walks. But what I've found, and Eckhart teaches this too, is sometimes when in these busy lives, it almost stresses you out, like another thing you got to add on the list. He was saying that it just takes one conscious present breath to bring you into presence and to almost have that moment of meditation to bring you into consciousness. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like a big breath and complete focus on that brings you back to presence and consciousness. I think that's cool and very empowering to think about that. Mm-hmm. If you just sigh, you just have one big intentional breath can bring you to that moment through what meditation actually can do in 15 minutes. I think that was empowering to hear.
Yeah.
So
my journey, I think that one of the most foundational things we can do is, first of all, define our values correctly. And that's harder than it sounds. But if we're just chasing some external number, whether that be money, whether that be a number on a scale, or an award of some sort, I'm talking with threes, of course, but you have to really identify what's important to you. And I think that part of that dissonance, part of that frustration that we have, and that tension, so to speak, with our goals, with our FOMO, is we're striving after something that's really disconnected with what's actually important to us. We may not want to admit that it's important to us, but if we can be honest with ourselves and define those values, then we set our goals based on those values. Those goals are going to be a lot more fulfilling. And then some of those numbers, they're still important. You have to track this stuff. I mean, these are just tools, but it becomes a very rewarding game. I think we were talking about this, Jacob, I believe, where that you need a certain amount of money, but if that money's not in the purpose of some higher goal, it becomes empty. Whereas, and you don't really know why you're going to work every day, and then you just beat yourself up. I need to get more and more.
I like what you're saying, because I found that since just with the business, since we defined our core values and their values, I tried for years, and finally we finally got a definition that I really believe in our core values. But that's helped to clarify a lot of what we do and what we don't do. And we do this, we don't do that. We fear less fear of missing out. No, this is our path. This is how I'm going to run my practice. I don't have to chase after all the stuff other people are doing. I mean, in my business, there's a big goal, but before I couldn't get behind it. I couldn't believe in it, because I was kind of like, what is this about? It's just about making money. Like, what is it about? It's making money. Yep. But now I won't go into the details, but I have a much different reason for achieving the goal, and it's a different value. It's a different reason behind it, and it's completely changed my belief in that goal and where we're going and why we're doing it, and the positive behind it. So
I think that's what it comes down to for me. So I think a lot of times that external to someone looking in it looks like the same behavior. It's like I'm still working hard in the practice, but I'm doing it in the service of a value that's important to me. I'm not just spinning my wheels because, oh, well, everyone on Facebook is doing this much and I'm not there yet, so I got to keep going until I hit that number, and then what? It's like nothing really changed. Yeah. So I think that's one.
Preach. That's good. That's good.
Defining your values accurately and then setting your goals based on those. Grant said practicing gratitude. That's one that I'm going to admit is hard for me. It's harder than it should be. It's really harder than it should be. But when I have been able to do that, it brings me into the moment, for one thing. It draws you into the present, because you can't be grateful for something you don't have. Right?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Keep that one in there. I'm not cutting that part. That part's good.
All right.
I like that.
I made the sound bite.
Wow.
But yeah, right. Like, it draws you into that present and it makes you feel satisfied. Doesn't mean that you don't keep plugging and doing. We're not dying here. We need to keep moving on, but practicing that gratitude. And then last night, I think we were all talking about being happy for others and being happy for their success.
Absolutely.
And again, this is one that sounds very simple, but it's hard to do. I don't want to embarrass Chris because he's not here right now, but maybe a little bit. Maybe we'll do it anyway.
More reason.
But
to do it,
I mean, anyone who's at that party last night, I mean, like the palace that party happened in.
Yeah.
I mean, that was impressive to a lot of people. And I know Chris and Morgan, two of the hardest working people that I'm aware of. He's just an absolute machine. The way that he's done this meeting and the way he works. So he's earned all this stuff. But you could look at that house and you could be like, well, screw this guy, this rich guy, and I don't have any of this. Or you could recognize, the definition of friendship. Eric Barker says the definition of friendship is identifying with someone else as an extension of yourself. So if you can get to that point where I look at Grant, I look at Jacob, and I'm like, you guys are actually extensions of myself. Your success is my success is your success. Then I'm no longer jealous of you. I get to share in that. Yeah. We all get to enjoy that house. We all get to enjoy the car or whatever it is. Yeah. The more that you can be happy for other people, I think that the more you get to share in that happiness yourself.
Amen.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Well, hey guys, I want to thank you for your time. This was a lot of fun. I was looking forward to this for a while. I'm glad we finally got this thing together. Hopefully this has been an enjoyable experience for you. Any last words before we sign off?
No, I think that
we got it.
I don't know anything else.
All right, guys.
Else for now.
Fantastic. Well,
thanks for having us on. It's an honor.
Again, thank you guys so much. This, of course, is the first of hopefully many podcasts to come. If you enjoy this podcast, we ask that you just follow us, give us a like, tell your friends. We really hope this has provided value, and we would love to see this continue. So, again, thanks everyone who was listening, and this is us signing off.
If you're an orthodontist that wants to connect with over 500 colleagues, hear over 30 of the best speakers in orthodontics, including the braces guy, Dr. Grant Collins, who you've heard on this podcast, and see 50 of the most cutting-edge exhibits, have a chance to win some of over $70,000 worth of prizes, including a trip to Kauai, and enjoy the absolute best parties in orthodontics, you won't want to miss the 7th Annual MOPC, the Mother of Pearls Conference, coming this October 9th through 11th. We're going big for our 7th year by renting out the Astronaut Memorial Foundation at the Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida. This is the hub for NASA, where they train more astronauts than anywhere else in the world, and SpaceX launches occur all the time. We toured the campus, and let me tell you, it's like the Disney World of space, with theme park attractions, actual space shuttles, interactive exhibits, and real astronauts. On top of the best speakers, we'll be having our world-famous Friday Night Pearls party under the Saturn Apollo 5 rocket, with dinner, drinks, space-themed activities, and live music from the world's only all-orthodontist band, Relapse. Early bird prices are about to go up for every 100 tickets sold and have already gone up twice. Be sure to register today with your team at orthodonticpearls.org to get the best price for the best conference in orthodontics. Plus, we are the only conference with worry-free registration. If anything comes up and you can't make it for any reason, you can transfer your registration to next year's conference absolutely free. It's a no-brainer. So be sure to lock in your best price by registering you and your team for the best conference in orthodontics, the Mother of Pearls Conference, at orthodonticpearls.org today.